Everyone thinks Iceland is a peaceful, breathtaking land of volcanoes, waterfalls, and the northern lights. But what they don't tell you is that it'll burn a hole through your wallet faster than a geyser shoots steam. This tiny island nation has a sky-high cost of living, $25 burgers, $5 bananas, and hotel rooms that make New York look cheap. But here's the twist. Icelanders aren't just putting up with it, they are thriving. Low crime, great healthcare, free education, and some of the happiest people in Europe. So what's going on? How can a country this isolated and expensive still be one of the most admired places on earth? In this video, we'll break down the real reasons why Iceland is so damn expensive, from its geography and economy to tourism, taxes, and some hidden facts that might surprise you. And stick around because in the last section, we'll reveal how Icelanders themselves beat their own crazy prices. Let's start with the most obvious reason. Iceland is isolated. It's a tiny island in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, far from any major trading hub. There are no neighboring countries to truck goods in from. Everything from smartphones to cereal has to be flown or shipped in, and that's a logistical nightmare. And when it comes to local production, it's severely limited. Iceland sits on volcanic rock that might be great for hot springs and epic landscapes, but not so much for farming. Only a small fraction of the land is suitable for agriculture. You won't find vast wheat fields or sprawling orchards here. In fact, apples, bananas, oranges, even tomatoes are mostly grown in greenhouses using geothermal heat. It's innovative, yes, but it's also expensive. For everything else, Iceland relies heavily on imports. That includes not just luxury goods but basic necessities: food, fuel, clothing, electronics, even construction materials. And the fewer items that are made domestically, the more vulnerable the country is to global price shifts and currency changes. Now add seasonality into the mix. Shipping lanes and air routes are affected by extreme weather conditions, especially in winter. When storms hit, supply chains slow down or shut down completely. That can lead to shortages, delays, and even higher prices at the checkout. And it's not just about the price of goods, it's about the cost of getting them there. Imagine a single container of groceries being shipped thousands of kilometers across oceans, stored in refrigerated warehouses, and transported over rigid train to reach a small town in northern Iceland. All those layers of handling, logistics, and weatherproofing, you're paying for it at the cash register. This logistical isolation doesn't just affect food, it hits fuel, building supplies, vehicle parts, electronics, basically everything that modern life depends on. And because Iceland's population is small, bulk shipping discounts don't apply the way they would in bigger markets. Every shipment costs more per person. So in a nutshell, being far away from everything, producing very little locally, and relying on weather-sensitive supply chains creates a perfect storm of high prices. And this is just the beginning. Iceland's economic puzzle only gets more interesting from here. If Iceland's isolation sets the stage for high prices, then its small population seals the deal. With just under 400,000 people, Iceland has a population smaller than many small cities. That might sound cozy, but economically, it creates a major problem: no economies of scale. In larger countries, companies can spread production and shipping costs across millions of consumers, but in Iceland, there simply aren't enough people to drive costs down. The result, each product ends up costing significantly more, not because it's fancier or higher quality, but because fewer people are sharing the bill. This small market also means less competition. In fact, in many sectors, Iceland doesn't really have a free market at all. A handful of dominant companies, or even just one, control everything from groceries to telecom to energy. These quasi-monopolies don't have much incentive to keep prices low. In the supermarket world, for example, two major chains dominate most of the country, and their prices tend to move together, upward. And it's not just Icelandic businesses charging high prices. Foreign companies know that operating in Iceland means extra costs for distribution and staffing. So when they do start up shop, they pass those costs on to the customer with interest. Whether you are buying a pair of Nike shoes or ordering a MacBook, chances are you are paying a premium over what someone in the US or Germany would pay for the same item. Then there is the labor market. Iceland has one of the highest average wage levels in Europe. That's great for workers. People can afford a high standard of living with access to healthcare, education, and generous parental leave. But for businesses, that means higher expenses across the board. On top of that, Icelandic workers are heavily unionized, and these unions are powerful. They negotiate not only high wages but also strict labor protections, strong benefits, and fair working conditions. Again, great news for workers. But it adds significant costs to doing business. Whether it's a cashier at a grocery store or a barista at a cafe, that higher paycheck is reflected in the prices you see as a customer. And remember, this applies to both products and services. Whether you are getting a haircut, dining out, calling a plumber, or buying groceries, you are essentially paying a small country premium. Every part of the economic chain, from importing goods to paying staff to limited competition, adds up, and the cost is ultimately passed on to the consumer. So while Iceland offers a strong, work-friendly society with high wages and solid protections, it comes at a price, literally. A small population, limited competition, and expensive labor all contribute to the high cost of everyday life. And when you combine that with isolation and imports, you start to understand why even a small trip to the store in Iceland can feel like shopping in a luxury boutique. If Iceland's geography and population create expensive conditions, its currency turns that into chaos. Say hello to the Icelandic krona, ISK, one of the smallest and most unstable currencies in the developed world. Unlike most European countries, Iceland doesn't use the euro. It has kept its own currency, which gives the government more control over monetary policy. That sounds smart in theory, but in practice, the krona is like riding a financial roller coaster with no seatbelt. Because Iceland's economy is small and heavily reliant on imports and tourism, the krona is extremely sensitive to global events. A drop in tourism, a rise in oil prices, or even just changes in international investor confidence can cause the currency to swing wildly. And when the value of the krona shifts, so do prices. Fast. For Icelandic importers, this is a nightmare. Imagine ordering a shipment of goods from Germany or the US at one exchange rate, and by the time it arrives, the krona has dropped. Suddenly, that shipment just got way more expensive. Businesses often have no choice but to pass that cost on to consumers. That's why prices can literally change from week to week, not based on demand, but on currency fluctuation. Now picture this from the perspective of a tourist. Most visitors come from countries using the euro, the US dollar, or the British pound. Since Iceland isn't part of the eurozone, tourists face higher exchange fees, worse conversion rates, and unpredictable costs during their stay. What looked like an affordable dinner when planning the trip might feel like fine dining robbery by the time you arrive. Even Icelandic locals try to work around their own currency. Many shop online from foreign retailers, paying in dollars or euros because it can be cheaper than buying the same item at home. Some even travel abroad for major purchases, from electronics to clothing, just to avoid the instability and inflated prices that come with using the ISK. During the 2008 financial crisis, Iceland's currency collapsed, losing nearly half its value overnight. Inflation skyrocketed, mortgages doubled, and the cost of imported goods soared. Even today, the krona hasn't fully shaken off that reputation. While the economy has recovered, the currency remains volatile and unpredictable, a risk that consumers, businesses, and tourists all have to factor in. And here's the ironic part. Despite all these issues, Iceland chooses to keep the krona. Why? Because adopting the euro would mean giving up control over monetary policy, which the government isn't willing to do. But in the meantime, the cost of keeping the krona is felt every day in groceries, gas stations, hotel bills, and your morning coffee. So when we talk about why Iceland is so expensive, we are not just talking about physical distance or high wages. The currency itself plays a huge role in making everything from a chocolate bar to a rental car more unpredictable and expensive than almost anywhere else in Europe. But before we go any further, please subscribe to the channel. Your support makes a real difference because with every subscription, we get motivated to make better content for people like you. Iceland isn't just expensive because of its geography or currency. A major reason lies in the government's own policies, especially when it comes to taxes, tariffs, and regulations. While these policies help fund high-quality public services, they also trap Icelanders and tourists in a cycle of ever-rising prices. Let's start with the value-added tax, VAT. In most of Europe, VAT hovers around 20%, but in Iceland, it's 24% on most goods and services, one of the highest rates on the continent. That means almost everything you buy, from a sweater to a smartphone, comes with an automatic quarter price markup courtesy of the government. And that's just the beginning. Iceland imposes heavy taxes on fuel and alcohol, both of which are considered luxury or environmentally harmful products. Fuel, for example, includes multiple layers of taxes that push gasoline prices to among the highest in the world. If you're wondering why taxis, rental cars, and even bus fares are so pricey in Iceland, this is a big reason. Then there is alcohol. In Iceland, you can't just walk into a grocery store and grab a bottle of wine. All alcohol above 2.25% ABV is sold through a government-run monopoly called Vinboam. The selection is limited, prices are steep, and that's entirely intentional. The government uses high taxes and restricted access as a way to control alcohol consumption. While it might work as a public health strategy, it adds yet another layer to Iceland's high cost of living, especially for tourists expecting to enjoy a casual beer without breaking the bank. Now let's talk about protectionism, especially in agriculture. Iceland tries hard to protect its local farmers, but that comes with a trade-off. There are high tariffs on imported dairy, meat, and certain produce, which makes foreign competition nearly impossible. That's why Icelandic cheese, butter, and meat often cost significantly more than their European or American counterparts, even when the local version is lower in variety or quality. This system supports rural jobs and food security, but consumers pay the price, literally. All of these taxes and tariffs serve a purpose. They help fund Iceland's impressive public services, including universal healthcare, free education, clean energy infrastructure, and a strong social safety net. Icelanders enjoy one of the highest living standards in the world, with life expectancy, literacy, and public well-being all ranked at the top. But the catch is clear. This quality of life comes at a steep financial cost. And while the government gives a lot back to its citizens, it also locks prices in a high-cost cycle. Even if wages are high, so are expenses. And for visitors who don't benefit from these public services, the price tags often feel more punishing than justified. So yes, Iceland is clean, safe, and socially advanced, but you are also paying for that every time you fill up your tank, eat a steak, or buy a bottle of wine. When people picture Iceland, they often imagine pristine waterfalls, glowing northern lights, and hot springs tucked into dramatic volcanic landscapes. And that dreamy image has worked. Over 2 million tourists visit Iceland every year. That's more than 5 times the country's entire population. While tourism has become one of Iceland's biggest industries, it's also become one of the biggest drivers of its high prices. Let's start in Reykjavik, the capital. With such a small housing market to begin with, the explosion of Airbnb's catering to tourists has created a housing crunch for locals. Property owners are often tempted to rent out their places short-term for tourists at inflated prices, rather than renting to residents on long-term leases. This has helped push housing prices and rents through the roof, making it harder and more expensive for Icelanders to live in their own capital. And that tourist pricing doesn't stop at rent. Restaurants, cafes, and even grocery stores have started to shift their pricing models to match what international visitors are willing to pay. That means a bowl of soup or a basic sandwich that might cost €5 in mainland Europe can easily run you €15 or more in Iceland. While tourists expect to pay more during their trip, locals are stuck with those prices every day, even for basic necessities. Tourism has also changed supply and demand dynamics in subtle but powerful ways. With so many visitors flooding the country, especially during peak travel seasons, everything from transportation to food delivery becomes more expensive. Suppliers raise prices to meet high demand, service providers need more workers, and that increases operating costs across the board. Meanwhile, Iceland's infrastructure hasn't kept up with this massive influx. Roads, airports, waste management systems, and even healthcare services are all under pressure from over-tourism. Maintaining and expanding infrastructure in a remote, volcanic island is already expensive, and millions of extra people using those services each year, and costs skyrocket. And guess who ends up paying for that? Both locals and tourists, through higher taxes, inflated service fees, and rising prices across the board. Even tourist attractions aren't immune. Some of Iceland's most iconic sites like the Blue Lagoon or the Golden Circle now come with steep entrance fees, timed tickets, and higher prices for everything from parking to food. While this helps fund upkeep and protects the environment, it also shifts Iceland away from the wild and free destination it once was, and makes every part of the experience cost more. To be fair, tourism has been a financial lifeline for Iceland, especially after the 2008 financial crash. It brought in jobs, foreign currency, and global attention. But it also created a tourist economy that locals now have to live in, not just visit. And as more people flock to Iceland each year, the line between economic boom and price bloating bubble is getting thinner. Iceland is often hailed as one of the greenest countries on earth, and for good reason. Nearly 100% of its electricity comes from renewable sources, primarily geothermal and hydroelectric power. The country sits atop a hotspot of volcanic activity which allows it to tap directly into the Earth's natural heat, and massive glacial rivers for hydropower, and you have a nation almost completely free of fossil fuels for energy production. That sounds like a recipe for cheap power, and in many ways it is. Icelanders do enjoy relatively low utility bills compared to most Europeans, but that's where the savings often stop. The reality is, being environmentally clean and green doesn't always come cheap, especially in a remote island nation with a harsh climate and limited agricultural land. Take farming and food production, for example. Iceland's climate is not naturally suited to growing much, especially during long, dark winters. So the country relies on high-tech greenhouses to grow vegetables like tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs. These greenhouses are heated and lit with geothermal and hydropower, which is sustainable but also capital intensive. That means Iceland can produce some of its own food, but it's not cheap food. Consumers pay premium prices for locally grown goods, even if they are organic and eco-friendly. Then there are environmental taxes and sustainability initiatives which aim to preserve Iceland's natural beauty but often result in high prices for goods and services. Whether it's a tax on car emissions, special levies on plastic packaging, or strict import regulations tied to sustainability standards, these costs are quietly passed on to the consumer. Visitors and residents alike end up paying more to keep Iceland green. But here's the thing, Icelanders are proud of it. There is a strong cultural identity tied to environmental stewardship, renewable energy, and living in harmony with nature. Even if it means higher costs, many Icelanders see it as a worthy trade-off for clean air, pure water, and a landscape that's untouched and awe-inspiring. It's not just about economies, it's a way of life. So while going green has a price tag, Iceland has chosen to embrace it and expects others to do the same when they visit. Sustainability may not be cheap, but for Iceland, it's non-negotiable. So, with sky-high food prices, housing shortages, a tiny market, and a currency that moves like a roller coaster, how do Icelanders survive all this? The truth is, they have learned to outsmart their own economy. Let's start with travel and shopping abroad. Many Icelanders fly to nearby countries like the UK, Denmark, or even Poland to do their bulk shopping. It's called a shopping trip, and yes, it's cheaper to book a flight, stay overnight, and fill suitcases with goods than to buy the same items in Reykjavik. Clothes, electronics, baby supplies, even food are often purchased abroad then brought back in. It sounds extreme, but when your domestic market adds 50% plus to basic goods, this strategy makes financial sense. Next, Icelanders are digital pros. Online shopping, especially from EU-based sites, has become a lifeline. People monitor exchange rates, wait for drops, and then order in bulk. Some even use freight forwarding services to bypass local markups altogether. There are whole Reddit threads and Facebook groups dedicated to timing imports just right to beat both taxes and price fluctuations. Buying used is another strategy. Iceland has a strong culture of second-hand goods, not out of necessity but practicality. From baby strollers to winter gear, many locals turn to online marketplaces or family networks instead of buying new. In a place where prices rarely make sense, the pre-loved economy thrives. And when it comes to services like restaurants or entertainment, many Icelanders simply opt out. Eating out is a rare treat, not a weekly habit. Most people cook at home, socialize in private gatherings, and enjoy the natural world for free, which luckily Iceland has in abundance. Most importantly, there is a sense of collective resilience. Icelanders know their country is expansive, but they also value the safety, community, and nature that come with it. So they have found clever ways to adapt, not by fighting the system, but by navigating around it. So yes, Iceland is expansive, shockingly so, but it's also a country of problem solvers. Locals have turned their tiny, icy, overpriced island into a model of sustainability, resilience, and creativity. They know the system is far from perfect, but instead of complaining, they adapt, outsmart, and continue thriving on their own terms. And if you think Iceland's situation is extreme, wait until you see what happened when Norway quietly took the entire Arctic coastline, leaving Sweden and Finland landlocked in the cold. And for that, you can click on the video showing up on your screen right now. And thanks for watching, mate. Bye.